guidance to elected members. It's not a forum for debate or decisions. It is also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or to bring other matters to the attention of council. If a member of the public does want to do this, please talk to staff and we will help you have your say. So, welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. Today we have invited an update on the Akaroa Wastewater project. Wastewater irrigation update. So, presenting this will be Motley Brett.
I'll do the first on the four slides and so good. So I'll talk briefly about the context, points we're talking about today, and then I'll pass over to Tony to talk in more detail about this project itself. So key points. The council, as you know, has got two roles in this process: as an advocate for consent, and as a consent authority, which rights or declines consent. This agreement is by the council in its capacity as advocate for consent. The application for resource consent for the irrigation scheme, the irrigation to land, has been put on hold by the commissioners because the commissioners said that they want to see applications from the council for discharge and treated overflow wastewater cover, and an application for the water wastewater discharge that comes from the scheme as a whole. They want to see those applications before they continue with the hearing of the irrigation to land application. Now, the law is changing this year. There are some new regulations that set wastewater standards, which have been notified in draft, and we expect to see a final version of those by the end of the year. It's unclear at this stage what impact those final standards will have on the application of the council lodged. That's the kind of legal process part of this briefing. The rest of it is project update. We talk about updated project forecasts. A little bit more information as well about council's assessment of the ocean outfall as an alternative to the current application. Ocean outfall of treated wastewater is offensive to Manapouri. In terms of the engineering costs of those, looking more feasible and relative to the cost of the current application, or financially palatable and possibly compared to payments decision on this back in 2020. So once the law changes, start the report back to the council, and that's likely to be in 2026. In the meantime, council has acted to continue with its applications. So turning to the status of those applications, as I said, the application for irrigation to land has been approved by the hearing commissions. They haven't finished their hearing. I'm going to start the hearing again until the council has lodged the determinations of the right team. And the team's estimated time frame for lodging those two applications is 1 year from September this year. That's the application for the discharge of the treated wastewater overflows into the harbour. And the second one is likely to be in December or January next year, lodgement date for the discharge of the water wastewater that will continue to be application discharge from the system. There will also be other miscellaneous construction consents that will go hand in hand with those. This is always the case in any big project. The council as applicant at this stage would intend to request a notification of those new consent applications. That's been one community concern, whether they will have the opportunity to take part in that process. And by requesting public notification, it's been started the consent process as well, because it means the consent authorities don't need to go through an assessment process themselves, right? It's going to be notified. But I've stated that as being current intent because we don't know yet what the new law is going to say. So that current intent might change. And the project team also intends to request that those new applications for the treated wastewater discharge to harbour or wastewater processing system be at the same time as the current applications by the same conditions. Just makes it much more straightforward. The law changes that are expected. The law changes that were expected this year are new wastewater standards for discharge to water, to land and for overflows. The draft of those standards suggests that applications cannot be declined if they have standards. That also might restrict the ability for states to start these resourcing processes. And see what they say. And also one of the central considerations for the council in its 2020 decision, which favored the current applications, is not going to be in the changed law. That central consideration in section 5 of the RMA that says that if you're applying discharge to water, the applicant needs to first investigate discharge to land and other alternative options and show that those alternative options are not feasible. But that requirement isn't going to be there anymore. But that doesn't change, that's a requirement in the RMA. That doesn't change the council's obligations under the Local Government Act to take into account all the exotic. It's possible that these new standards might have made discharge to harbour without force, might make the consent process for those easier than it is at the moment. That's possible. It looks that way in the consultation drafts, but as I say, we don't know what the final is going to say yet. So the implications of all that, as I highlighted a moment ago, there's no change to the council's duty to consult and decide the options under the Local Government Act if the council was to look at taking a different approach to the current applications. And it's not the right time to look at taking a different approach now because the law's about to change. We need to know what the law is because that's going to influence the pros and cons of the options. And that's the context of you. That's me.
So on to the non-legal half of the project. Currently, we've got several things moving whilst the consent process continues. Number one is addressing the preliminary design process and bedding in aspects of that, getting the engineering done so we can proceed whatever the outcome seems in some good manner. We've also had 300 mil of rain about 48 hours at the start of the month, which is a really nice stress test for our irrigation scheme. A lot of concerns were raised in public consultation about that sort of event. It held up really well. One of the access tracks had a scour where it lost gravel. A few minor localised slips outside the irrigation area, but otherwise held up great. So nice to see that stress test passing and work of the geologists and scientists and geotech engineers stacking up. That's good. We've also been doing planting activities at Robinson's Bay. This started several years ago. We could consent would only take 12 to 18 months. 7 years in the future now, the trees are growing. So we've been continuing with planting and farm maintenance work against this tracks up here at the site. So that's looking fantastic. You want to have a visit, let us know. Go for a look. On the downside of the project at the moment, the engineering work to date is pushing up the expected construction price, and the P95 cost, which is our cost with estimation plus all the risk allowances growth, that's sitting at 167 million. It's far more than our budget. So of that, there's 34 million in contingency items, possible risk items that may or may not eventuate, but it's still a number. And along with that, there's also been work on what will it cost to operate, run, and maintain the site farm. That's 650,000. Now, I'll just remind you that 167 million isn't just an irrigation scheme, network, pump stations, treatment plants, whole shooting match.
Sorry, I'll just. Does that include devotionals in that, or would that be on top of that?
That's devotionals.
Include. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that means there could be a budget change in the future if the question start, but we want to get through the consent stage, get a consent, get through the preliminary engineering and run the ground with fiscal items, get the new law in place to understand where we stand. Once all of that's come together, then it's time to talk. Is it budget change? What's the size? Is there a change in cap? That sort of thing. So it's an early warning at this stage. Key risks, obviously, the funding risk. Our other big risk is with the extended time frame, we may need to seek a short-term discharge consent for the existing Akaroa output that expires in 2030. That's sort of hanging out there to keep an eye on. And we've also got at devotional, we've still got the land instability risk, the hillside above the treatment plant, which is the risk of the plant and the operators. That's why we want to get out there. So that's not going away. That's still a risk list. A little bit around why this cost escalated. So the range of key items, obviously, there's lots of pieces to the puzzle, but these are the key ones. Preliminary design is flushing out that the wastewater treatment plant is going to require more foundation work and ground preparation work than originally envisaged. We're running that with the design at the moment to see what happens, but there's a $1 million risk allowance in the prices of that.
Is that for the is that for the treatment plant?
So the Island Road.
Yeah, when it gets moved to the
Yeah. So regardless of what we do with water, it's going to be treated. That's the headache we've got on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
$5 million in increased storage. As part of the consent process, we increased the storage scheme from 1,000 to 4,000. That's pushed up cost. Wastewater treatment plant, bringing in the devotional scheme, that pushed up around 4 million on the treatment plant cost for the extra 25% below that we get from devotional. So that's just the size and the process of the plant. Next one is our long pipeline work down NZTA road corridors. The standards for NZTA road access are getting more onerous than they used to be. So we have to put the bill there. There are opportunities to reduce that, but we've gone under the high costs. Not go down the NZTA corridor. Now that's what we've budgeted on. Additional things, treated wastewater release to the harbour. So we still need a path to get rid of treated wastewater anywhere else. On those friction situations, it's got to go to harbour. We've had a lot of pushback from the community to us. Extend that away from the shore and get it out in the bay. Tidal zone, that's supported by our RMA process, where we look at the water safety risks to people. Sure, so allowing for that another $3 million. And the last one, which we're all familiar with, is inflation. That's a hard one to engineer out. So we've got a $4 million allowance cost escalation, inflation, construction industry. That's something we're up against on every front. That's the bad. One of the big alternatives in the community is what about an ocean outfall? Or to split the water side. Go too fast. Ocean outfall in this context is a pipeline that runs out past the harbour heads, so it's about 16 metres of marine pipeline that goes throughout. And that's what we mean by ocean outfall, so not into the harbour, but beyond the head. Obviously, it's been promoted by some members of the community as an alternative irrigation scheme. It still remains offensive to mana whenua. Discharge the water is discharged with the harbour or the sea. One and the same. We've had a look at it in more detail because we know this is going to get a lot of questions and scrutiny. We want to get that information ahead of time. And if we go to the bottom line, switching to ocean outfall could reduce the costs down to 148 million, with the same risk allowances and contingencies applied as the irrigation plan. So it's a little bit cheaper and it has risks, it has benefits as per its times. Operationally, it's also lower cost to operate. It's just less asset to deal with, and that reduces down to about $380,000. So it's worth about $7.3 million over 50 years. So the decision of whether or not to pursue an ocean outfall further is really, as Brent alluded to, something we suggest for later when we've got the law done, the more engineering pieces of the puzzle, and then see where things lie this year, starting next year. That's it in a nutshell for the slides. There's lots of hands.
Right, Sarah had a hand up first.
Thank you. Really, really interesting. Thank you. Three questions. Firstly, the storage capacity thing, applied for consent for the containers. The original panel decision was to go with the staff recommendation, which was the on, but to look at the other storage option. Would it be cheaper and more resilient to go back to the original? I mean, there's now complaints from the community about the fact that we've got those, right? So that's kind of the first thing. I don't know. Is it worth looking at that shift?
Possibly, could be something to have a look at the end.
Okay. Then again, with the ocean outfall, it's mentioned that it's maybe lower issues of I&I, so maybe we should do this. But is there still the potential for the untreated discharge close to shore in major problems? So, because what we're hearing from the community is that they don't want the risk of the untreated one, and therefore we should go to harbour outfall, but the risk still remains.
The risk is the same. So in both cases, you've got a network of 1,100 properties drained by gravity to a couple of pump stations and off to the treatment plant. The pumping in that gravity network are the restriction, not the treatment process or what lies beyond it. So it overflows.
So we would still need to get for that if we were doing. Okay, so that's good to know. And when we get our next update, could you, or even in like one of the Friday updates, could you have a table through that actually shows, because it's 3 separate projects originally, and while we're saying, our original decision was 67 million and now it's 167. Actually, we're now combining 3 projects. You have the 3 original projects, and then what the new project is, and the sort of the equivalent escalation within each or.
Yeah, what's
the pump station was already decided separately, or the new treatment facility was decided separately first, and that was a $30 million or whatever cost.
Oh, okay.
Then there was what we're going to do with it, with the irrigation being consulted on, and that was the 60 odd million. and then there's devotions. So what people tend to equate with in the media is originally just the hearings panel has a decision on what to do with the water. And then they're going, oh, that's a huge escalation, but it's actually, if we could just get there really clear publicly, that would be great. When it comes public, but even for our mind. Thank you.
Aaron.
A couple of good ones. So first up, with the ocean outfall, is the quality of the water that would be pumped out there the same as what we put out off the coast from Christchurch? Same quality, lower quality, higher quality?
Higher.
So higher quality.
At this stage, yeah.
Okay, so that one's obviously culturally repugnant to mana whenua as well. Okay, just checking that line's still the same. And then, so there's that one. And then the next one is probably the most difficult one is, at any point do we start again? Because the cost per property now is exorbitant. It's just so I don't quote the number wrong. It's almost $152,000 per property. That is, I mean, what happens when you build a new town or something? That you can't build a town when you'd go, oh, well, you're moving in, your plumbing bill before you even start is going to be $152,000 per section. Everyone would go, okay, we're not building here.
He said it was a different.
So I'll add something. This is two options we've talked about today. I mean, we have to do something.
Absolutely.
The easiest way to say there is no cheap option here. It's going to be expensive, partly due to the location, but also the challenges that we were operating. So it's either land-based or it's the ocean. There's no silver bullet.
So how does the rest of the world solve this problem when they build places? Because they can't be at that rate, because that's just not feasible. Can't live there.
I can't talk about the rest of the world, but I know the recent time in the last 12 or 18 months, there's been articles and papers about other places around New Zealand facing the same issues that we are. And that's partly why I think we're pushing these new wastewater standards to.
Okay, so do we look around the rest of the world? Because I've seen lots of very populated places that are next to water, and the water's beautiful, pristine, and clean, and you'd eat the fish from it. So they're doing something with their sewage in those areas, and they can still afford to live there. So that's because just the number doesn't match. It just.
That's why the government's changing the standards.
But the population booms, it's a tourist town as well, so it's not just number of.
Yes, but as a council, we have to solve problems without the checkbook. You can't just. It's just impossible. If we said that to every household in Christchurch, you've got 150, we'd just have to move out. Couldn't even live here anymore at that rate.
That's why the government's changing it to make sure to allow people to not treat the water to its highest standard.
Okay, right. Kelly?
Questions been answered, but if we do go with the oceans from I'm assuming that the capacity would allow for considerable growth in the area, or is that way down the track?
There's a little bit down the track to put a number on that, but we have to consider what's growth over the lifetime of that asset and what's the right size. There is a bit of an issue around building the pipe too big to start with. We can't go too far, it doesn't work, but looking at a lot back.
And I don't ask you to speak for mana whenua, but do you get an idea of really what they'd like to see in terms of land-based?
They'd like to see it go on land and not the river.
The current application is consistent with what mana whenua were seeking back in 2019 to 2020.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, okay, thank you. So at the beginning of May, we got a rainfall event that we had 200 mils of rain fell in Akaroa over a couple of days. So if we were to think that that was going to become the norm rather than the exception, do we have a sense of what that would do to our current modelling, or is that not taken into account?
Straight answer is we haven't really run the model, which is nice. So can't answer that. Be okay. I tell you that.
With the 24,000 cubic metres,
You got
the volume, is that like, I understand that that's considered to be underplaying the amount of storage needed. Do you have any comments on that? I understand 36,000 is being touted as a number that's kind of, depending on which modelling you look at.
no, there's also modelling that says it's more than enough. So it lies statistics when it comes to models. But if you wanted enough storage to eliminate all discharges of treated water, you need probably double that. So there's always a bigger winter somewhere that's going to catch it. So it's about trying to find a pragmatic point to stop. And certainly debate, is it too much, is it too little? But you certainly don't want to be trying to get everything. That's the doubt.
Thank you. So just a couple more, if that's all right, you wish. So yeah, I was surprised that the comparability between the ocean outfall number and the so close to each other is they're both astronomical. So it's sort of, it's neither here nor there, really, is it?
That's a good question.
Are there any, like, obviously other options were considered at the time, and given the changing landscape and what we know now compared to what we knew 5 years ago, or even 5 years ago. So are any of the other alternatives that were looked at the time, do they come back into play at all? Or would they be similarly exorbitant, presumably?
So I'll answer about the decision-making process. But if the council decides, once we know what the new law is, if the council decides it wants to reconsider the decision that a council made back in 2020 to go with this as the preferred option, then staff to assist council go back to making a long list, making a short list, taking the council through the pros and cons of all of those.
Right. So, right process. Just the outfall, I mean, as it stands, the overflow would be into to Children's Bay, quite close to the town. Lovely beach. Are there any alternatives to that? I mean, it has to be. I mean, what's the alternative to Children's Bay?
And you're oddly heading back to the 2015 consent application, which was to click a mile out, so it's in the deep water channel, away from the beaches. But you're essentially going back to what was applied for in 2015.
Yeah. And just finally, just on the INI. So now the recommendation that council agreed to was reducing the INI down to 20%. So I understand that that's 20% of what it was back then. Was that ever going to be achievable?
Describe it as aspirational. It is achievable, but it's not assured.
Right. All right. Thank you,
Tyler?
Thank you. Thanks.
Just two quick ones. The first one was with the law changes, and I'm probably expecting that you'll give us an update on what happens. Because I'm probably expecting that the fertility principles will be removed from Wednesday. Then the next question is around the ocean outfall. I'm wondering about the tidal movements. So if there was the proposed one that's been put up here, is there potential for the treated wastewater to blow back into the shores with the tides?
What we're currently proposing. Yeah, so we're just on the back of getting the with runner of the harbour and having that matter. Does it wash into the shore? Does it wash out the harbour? How does it best operate?
Okay.
Yeah, that's key for that distribution as we go.
Okay.
Tyler, you were asking about the outflow one, not the current plan that's leasing into the harbour. You,
So option 2.
Oh, Goshen, yes. We haven't modelled that one yet, so that is a concern that discharge, does it go in or out?
Yeah.
We haven't nailed that one.
Yeah, that's where some of the risk money would be in terms of, so if we did the modelling, we want to go another kilometre. So that's the unknown of that option.
Okay, does that mean that there may be no swimming spots?
So even under the proposed standards,
Yep.
you're required to do a
QMRA.
QMRA. Yeah, so that's essentially a study that includes that. So here the payment limit of 40,000 bucks that you're allowed. Discharge 5,000. That study will be based on the account get to the shore, so allow shellfish collection and swimming.
Okay.
So even with the proposed standards, there is some requirements there that we do not have adverse effects on shore.
Okay.
super high priority.
Hey, Yanni,
Thank you. So there's been some concern that we're going to reduce the standards for the ocean outfall. Just trying to understand, in terms of the approach with mana whenua, have they got a view about the current ocean outfall being acceptable or not? The one in New Brighton.
They didn't support it really later.
and it's got a consent till 2050 or something.
So there's no issue there currently.
Yet.
But would it,
We can't speak for Mother Whenua, but let's just put it in what we do now. Discharge of wastewater, treated or untreated, to water is a concern. We also know that there's a pretty big city that needs to do something to its wastewater, and it simply can't.
No.
So discharge might be both culturally used and pragmatically something that needs to be accepted.
so just in terms of the question that Tyrone was asking before, like obviously we're going through with the things like activated sludge at the wastewater treatment plant. In terms of there's a whole bunch of modular kind of technology for sites that are space constrained. I just, when I look at the cost, I struggle to comprehend that there's no other viable solution to do something internal with the wastewater. But is there really no other technology other than either ocean outfall or land discharge that would be practical that we've looked at? Like,
We looked at taking it over to Bromley, didn't we, even?
Yeah, but even then it's going to go out in the ocean. Okay, right, moving right along. Thanks, Yanni. Aaron?
so there's nothing.
We've got to treat it. We've got to collect it to one place. Got to treat it. That in of itself is a very easy exercise, especially given the constraints.
Right.
So there are ways of making it cheaper, but they're around building treatments down in the main in downtown Akaroa, and that's probably not palatable for them. So.
And lastly, Aaron, please.
So just on alternate systems, because I did remember watching a documentary on it, the Omni processor, which is the one Bill Gates funded, where sewage goes on one end and drinking water comes out the other. And there's in the footage, Gates himself drinks the water out of the thing. I know it's a bit loopy, but it was, he's developed that through a scientist, and you've possibly seen it. And Yeah, it's phenomenal because it's for African countries and stuff like that where they can't afford big sewage systems. The Omni processor can process sewage from up to 100,000 people and costs $2 million a unit. And it's drinking water quality out the tail end.
Your question?
Why do we not? So my question is, why are we spending $160 million when we could be spending 3-4 lots of $2 million, or even let's make it a council number, $10 million instead of the 2.
So the question is, the treatment plant.
Yeah. We tell them we've got lots of Africans living in Akaroa.
Gavin's talking.
So just to say the cost of the treatment plant is 30 million. So that's the, of the 160 is right.
Yep.
That's 30 million for the treatment plant.
So then, okay, so then all the other stuff is everything else. So that's, I mean, that's only 15 times, well,
So why don't
no,
we just
it's
drink
7.5
it when it
times the
comes out?
price. But yeah,
Okay. All good?
Jason?
Kira?
well, yeah, I'm keen that we ditch this and actually look at alternate solutions. Like the Omni processor. Well, I mean, why do we not? Is the question the ratepayer would want to know.
We'll look at it. I think for something that we do want to say that we drink
Yeah.
twice the price, it wasn't that cheap.
Hmm.
But we will have a lot in there.
Okay.
And that's,
That's US dollars. So that's still 4 million. But there's only, I mean, if anyone's seen the doco, the hilarious parts of the tomato seeds, but and you'll know when you watch it, but
Labour and so on.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Right. Lastly, me, because once again we've gone over, but that's good. They're going to have a look at that. With the devotionals thing, because you've got to go 1.5 metres deep in the lovely transit road, which is good. Is there an option to bring devotional straight up the harbour and rip it into the new wastewater treatment plant if they've all that digging on the road? So that's an option that it must be cheaper. I don't know, but that's something.
That, or there may be some landowners doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I, if it's ocean outfall, I won't be quite so troublesome because it's more like thinners. Okay, and also if and I might be wrong here, if you've got the new wastewater treatment plant on the hill or up the hill, maybe at the top or halfway down it, it'll go to the ocean, you won't need to pump it. But if you're taking it over to Robinson's Bay, you've got to pump it to Robinson's Bay, pump it into a tank, pump it out onto the irrigation thing. So there's a lot of less OPEX, isn't it, which you've identified, but that's just...
And that's that power savings.
Mm. Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much, guys. And thanks for coming in. And you'll be back to us once the government comes back to us. Keep us up to date with anything else that's happening on the way through. Excellent. Thank you.
Let us know what the dates is.
Yeah, he might be feeling a bit.